Hello, everyone that just joined us. Thank you for muting yourselves when you came in. I super appreciate it. If you haven't muted yourselves yet, please go ahead and do so. We will be beginning the talk hopefully fairly soon. This will also be streamed on Facebook if you have to leave early. And yeah, we're super grateful that you guys were able to join us tonight. Hello, everyone. We will probably be beginning in another couple minutes, probably around 6:05 or so, just to let a few more people hop on, and then we'll be getting started with our special guest speaker. Thank you guys so much for hopping on. Thank you so much, especially for muting yourselves as you hop on, and we hope that you guys enjoy.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jordana Soccer, and I am the Chair of Cultural Programming on Cornell Hillel Student Executive Board. Before I introduce our guest, I wanted to remind everyone that this talk will be available to view afterwards on the Cornell Hillel Facebook page, and there will be a Q&A following the talk. Continuing to hear the stories of Holocaust survivors is a vital part of ensuring history does not repeat itself. Everyone's story is different, but they all represent the fight to protect religious and cultural freedom that was torn away from the Jewish people. This is an opportunity to remember, reflect, and learn, as we must never forget. Our guest speaker has lived an extraordinary life. Today, he will tell his story. We are humbled and honored to have him speak to the Cornell community this evening. Please help me welcome to our Zoom stage, Peter Somogyi.
Good evening. My name is Peter Somogyi. I was born in 1933, the same year Hitler came to power. Hitler at that time promised the German nation 1,000 years of Germany. However, it lasted only 12 years, from 1933 to 1945. But during this 12th year, he and his accomplices went on a murderous agenda that cost millions and millions of lives, including 6 million Jews, including my mother, my sister, my grandmother. But let me start showing my family. First, my mother, my father, my sister, twin brother, and myself. We lived in Pécs, Hungary. My father had a very good business. We are not rich, but we are quite comfortable, very comfortable, nice house surrounded with fruit trees. Everything was fine. 1939, September 1st, the first day the Second World War started. That's the first day I went to school. Luckily, in the town where I lived, there was a Jewish elementary school. And after the 4 years of elementary school, unfortunately, I had to go into high school. In Hungary, they call gymnasium from grade 5 to 18. However, unfortunately, we had to get into a parochial school, and as Jewish kids at that time, already in the 1940s, we were not very welcome. As a matter of fact, once in a while, harassed us, sometimes even a little bit of beating. And everything went fine. Our family was all right. However, the whole hell broke out on 1944, March 19, the day Germany invaded Hungary. The moment they came in, they started their harsh anti-Jewish laws. Immediately had to wear yellow stars, and within a few weeks, we had to leave our home and go into a ghetto. We had a beautiful house, as I said, and we had to leave it, only what we can carry with ourselves, and went into somebody else's house with one or two other families. So we had to share 2 or 3 families, kitchen and the bathroom, and all what we had, one room for my mother, my sister, and my twin brother, and myself. The moment the Germans came in, within a week, all the able-bodied men were called in for paramilitary service, including my father. He left within a week, and we lost contact with him totally. We just didn't know where he went. There was, I didn't know where he went. All what I know that at the end of the war, he survived Dachau. That's all what I know. Anyway, as soon as we had the yellow stars, within a couple of weeks, we had to get into the ghetto. We stayed in the ghetto for about 2 months. During that time, we knew the news, what's happening. We heard D-Day, June 6th, D-Day, and we were hoping that, hey, the war will be over very shortly, and we will survive the whole thing. Unfortunately, it did not happen. 2 months into the ghetto, one day we just got an order, pick up everything, to take whatever you can take with yourself, and we were marched into one of the Hungarian army's horse style, where we stayed for a couple of days. During that time, the surrounding villages, Jewish people also came in, and we stayed on that place for about 2 or 3 days, and then came the order, take whatever you can with you. We were lined up and, excuse me, and marched to the railway station. We were packed into this railroad car, cattle car, about 70 to 80 to each railroad car, and with only one bucket for sanitary purpose. And we got probably every family, if I remember well, it goes back to quite a few years. We got each of us one loaf of bread for the duration, which we don't know what was the duration. However, it turned out that it was close to 3 days and 3 nights. And finally, on July 9th, later in the afternoon, we arrived into Auschwitz-Birkenau. They opened the doors, the railroad cars, and said the first thing was they shouted, out, out, schnell, out, but leave everything inside. Don't take any of your belongings with you. We will take it to you as soon as we relocate you to a new location. However, it never happened. We were lined up waiting. The first thing that hit me was the smell. And then I saw a big chimney spewing 5, 6, 8, I don't remember all, flames. I thought it was a factory. Yes, it was a factory. It was a factory of death. That's what it was. They lined up, and as we were waiting over there, Mengele came around. When we were lined up, my mother looked around and said that people were separated. They were separating here and there. And she said to us, don't say you are 11 years old, say you are 9. Maybe they will keep us together. Because the younger kids, maybe, that was her hope. However, it never happened. Unfortunately, while we were standing in the line, Mengele came around. Mengele came around and they asked for twins. My mother didn't know what to do at that moment, so she didn't say anything. But the second and the third time, finally, my mother said, yes, I have twins. There was 2 soldiers behind Mengele. They grabbed us. I never had the chance to say goodbye. That was the last time I ever saw my mother and my sister. And we were put into a ambulance and driven into F lager. And this is the map of the Birkenau itself, and this little red sign. There's a little red sign. This is the camp. This is the barrack that I was taken into it. This was called F lager, Krankenlager. One side was some of the twins, the other side was some other experiments done by other people. As soon as we arrived in that place, the first thing was happened is that I got my number. That was the very thing. I ceased to be Peter Somogyi. I became A17454. That was my name. That was I was known about it. Next, we met the men Mengele put in charge of the twins. That was a twins barrack with about, if I remember, about 35 pairs of twins between the ages of 9 up to 15, 16. And there was a man put in charge by Dr. Mengele because to keep us in the order. The man who was in charge of us used to be an officer in the Czech army, so he knew discipline, and that's what Mengele wanted from this man.
He was also a twin.
He was also a twin, yeah, but only one side, because the other side was the twin was a woman. Anyway, as soon as I got my number, and the man who was in charge of us asked, introduced himself that he's he's in charge of us twins, asked him when I can see my mother. Well, he didn't say much. He just showed the picture, the outside, the burning chimney. Says, that's where your mother is. And that's when I found out I will never see her again. That's when I found out what happened to her. That we arrived over early afternoon, mid-afternoon, and that was also the food time when they gave us the food to everybody. When I looked at it, I said, I will never able to eat this one. There's no way I can eat it. It took us about 2 days, but after 2 days, hunger took over, and believe me, I started eating it, and I was happy when I found a piece of potato in it. We were also assigned the bunks where we were staying. Ours was a center bunk with 6 of us in there. There was some covers, and I think it was straw underneath. I don't remember exactly. 6 of us. It was so tight that when one of us had to turn, all of us had to turn at the same time. This is the welcome arrival of myself, for me at the Auschwitz-Birkenau when I started my 6 or 7 months duration over there. Next morning, we had to see Dr. Mengele, and they started the so-called experiments. I tell you quite frankly, I'm alive only because I'm a twin. Otherwise, I would have been gone with my mother and the sister into the gas chamber immediately. But while we were standing over there, Mengele pulled me out. One time I thought that I said he saved my life. No, he didn't. He just kept me alive for his own stupid experiments. But that's why I'm alive today. Next day, as a matter of fact, as I mentioned, I saw Dr. Mengele started the so-called experiments, blood taking measurements, measured the head, every side of the head, measurements left and right, and taken blood. Probably we got an injection also, I'm not sure, but this is how they. We were very, very lucky that they got over there late. There was horrendous, murderous experiments, deadly experiments. Some of them experiments. Some of the experiments was that one of the kids out of the 2, one of them was injected some kind of material, and he died. And then he opened up the dead one, and they opened up the control, who was control, his other brother, opened up, and they started comparing the insides of them. That was called a Germanic experiment. Luckily, I survived also this one because the experiments, because I got there very late, only say 7 months before the liberation, and during the 7 months, I had it was enough for a lifetime, the 7 months. We didn't have to work, we just had to exist for the pleasure of Dr. Mengele. We had to be constantly clean, ready for him whenever he wanted to see any one of them. I was called in 3 times or 3 or 4 times for special measurements and checking probably an injection. Twice we had to walk from Birkenau to Auschwitz itself, which is about 2 miles, because he had offices in Auschwitz also, and we had experiments over there. The dead bodies. Yeah, but that's everything. We didn't have to work, we just had to exist for his pleasure. Every morning we had to go make sure that we are clean because Mengele wanted everybody clean. We went to the washroom every morning. On the way to the washroom, on the side of the road, every morning, one of the barracks, the third barracks from us, because the first barrack was ours, the second was Mengele's office, and the third one housed some experiments. Probably people who can survive without food. They look like this, but every morning, 10 to 15 bodies, dead bodies was laid out on the side of the road. So by that third or fourth day, I got very used into to see dead bodies going all around. Mengele was also interested in dwarfs. And there was a family of 7 dwarfs, 5 women and 2 men. The 2 men were in our barracks, the 5 women in the women's side. And there was one very disfigured, very sick dwarf also, that later on the man in charge of us asked me to take care of him and make sure that he get his food all the time, and I had to sleep next to him. One morning there was a cold body next to me. He passed away during the night, and you know something, I have seen so much dead bodies that it just didn't make any difference to me that there was that dead body next to me.
You want to talk about Canada?
Now, there's a section over there, if you can you go back to the map? This section here on top, above the blue line, called Canada. That's where all the merchandise, all that we left into the cattle car, all the all the clothing that what happened to our family in the gas, before the gas chamber, where they undressed all of them, they all went into this place. Now I have to stop here for a moment and I try to explain to you what happened to my mother and sister and my grandmother and the rest of my family. I didn't see it myself. There was 1 or 2 men, Sonderkommando men. Sonderkommando was the people who were working the crematorium and working the gas chambers. And their story, I found out what really happened to my family after I left them. I was taken away from them. They were marched into an underground place where they all had to undress. The final degradation for my 13.5-year-old sister had to undress naked in front of a 15 or 16-year-old male cousin, but they all had to undress. They herded into another big place, supposed to be a shower place. They locked them in, and instead of shower, they started throwing into the cyanide. And as far as I heard from these people who survived it, the Sonderkommando who survived it, the children and the ones who were lower part on the ground died immediately because the gas was so lethal. And then some of them, the stronger ones, started climbing on top of each other until there was air left in the same place. And when they opened up the gas chamber, it looked like a human pyramid of dead bodies. And this is how my family and my mother and my sister ended their lives. This is the picture of the crematorium itself, the gas chamber. The other one, the big chimney used to go flames, say about 10, 15 high. Constantly, day and night, it was burning because as the transport came in, they immediately sent them into the gas chambers. Our lives was very simple. We didn't have to work. We just had to exist for the pleasure of Dr. Mengele. And sometimes the man who was in charge of us tried to teach us certain things like geometry or
Math,
no, not geometry.
geography.
No, it's geography.
Geography.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. Sometimes I was looking for words, and that's how we spent our days for the next 7 or so on.
Iteration.
And one day, another SS officer came, also a doctor, and lined us up, and we had to undress naked. And they started looking at him. They went with his finger, this, right up the number. And then we were locked in, and we knew that we are ready for the gas chamber also. We knew that this is the day. We just were taken away, put in another room and locked in. Luckily, Mengele got wind of it and stopped this quasi-execution of us.
No, the gypsies.
Yeah. Also, there was next to our lager, the F lager, there was E lager. E lager housed the gypsies, about 1,500 to 2,000, which one night, all of them were gassed and burnt in one night. And that was when we found out that our number is awesome, because that happened about a day before we were selected. Anyway, we survived this one. What?
Okay, sure, go ahead.
And this was the second time I escaped the gas chamber, because the first time Mengele pulled me out of the line. We stayed over there. This is how I looked. And that's our liberation, also after liberation. But before that, around January, mid-January, when the Russians are coming much faster, and we heard the shooting and everything, the first time we had to work, I mentioned that the section over that's called Canada.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going back.
Yeah, Canada, that had to be emptied, and since there was no other workers left, we twins had to push carts and load up all this merchandise, clothing, shoes, everything, whatever it was over there, loaded into the push carts. And the bitter cold, it was already early January, bitter cold. We had to push those push carts all the way to the railway station. That's when the first time I saw some humanity. One of the soldiers, there was SS all around us, beating us nonstop. But there was one older, regular army soldier who saw that I was suffering over there. And suddenly he put his hand into his pocket and pulled out a sugar cube. I don't know how dirty it could have been, but I ate it right away, because for the first time I had something sweet. And that's the first time I saw some humanity around people. Now, late January, I think January 20th or 21st, we had to empty, they wanted to empty already the lager itself, the section is camp, and we were lined up. I know that there was a would have been a death march, because before we were lined up, there was already a selection, and some people were taken out already and marched, and probably were shot during the march into the forest. I know that when we were lined up, I knew that it's going to be a death march also, because non-stop I heard shooting. All the people who were not able to walk, they were shot on the spot. While we were standing, it suddenly started moving, and what happened is suddenly looked around and all the German soldiers disappeared. And that's when we started walking toward Auschwitz. From Birkenau to Auschwitz, we stayed over there for a couple of days. And on January 27, early afternoon, I saw the first Russian soldier. That's when I found, finally, we are free. Finally, that I don't have to look around. Don't have to wait when my numbers are coming up, because it's twice we were supposed to die during that time. Twice there was a selection, and then towards the end, with that march, but luckily I survived it. What we did, the next thing we had to do is, there was no food anymore. The kitchen stopped working, so for the last 3 or 4 days of Birkenau, there was no food anymore. So that's when we really started starving. There was nothing to eat, nothing. And then when we arrived back from Birkenau to Auschwitz during the night, when we get over there, there was some people were able to locate some of the Germans' places where they had the food, but by the time I got over there was nothing left. So January 27 in the afternoon, we got liberated. The Soviet soldiers liberated us. And a day later, we asked the man who was in charge of us, please take us away from here, because in case by any chance the Germans come back, they will shoot us and they will kill us right away. So a day later, after liberation, I think it was January 28 or 29, we started walking toward Krakow. Bitter cold, but we had to make sure that we don't stay in the place, because we were afraid in case the Germans come back, they will kill us definitely. I was skipping over there what happened during the time where I was in Birkenau itself. Really, we just existed for the pleasure of Dr. Mengele, and we had to be ready all the time whenever he needed us for experiments. We started walking toward Krakow. We arrived 3.5 days later. We arrived and walked into Krakow. There was no food anymore. Luckily, the man who was in charge of us found a place where once a day we got some warm food. However, it was not enough, and started walking from house to house, knocking on doors, asking for a slice of bread. Clever slice of bread. Sometimes they got, sometimes we get kicked out. To make a long story short, it took us from my hometown to Auschwitz 3.5 days to get there. From Auschwitz back to my hometown, it took us 3.5 months to get back, sometimes on foot, sometimes on a truck, sometimes on a open railroad cars, while we were walking, and sometimes during this 2.5 months, we were not able to wash. I was full of lice later on. And I think about around mid-April, with the help of some of my neighbors who found us, I got back to my hometown. One of my mother's cousins was already back. We stayed with him, and his idea was, don't dwell on what happened to you. Go back to school and keep on studying, because this is what you have to do. So This is my family that went into Auschwitz-Birkenau itself. The two men who was in circus in this place, my uncle and my father, they are the only two who survived in this whole group of people. Most of the men were in paramilitary service. The rest of them look at that little kids. Why did they have to die? Why did they kill them? Why did they murder them? Why did they gas all these little kids? 2 years old, 3 years old, 5 years old, 6, up to 15. Even my mother, my sister, 13 and a half, they all had to perish. They had to be gassed. Why? Why did they do it? Anyway, I arrived back, we went back to school. Later on, I found out my father survived Dachau. He first didn't want to come back, but decided to come. He found out that somehow his twin, he didn't want to come back because he thought that the whole family perished because he heard what really was going on at that time. But later on, he found that his twin children survived. So he decided to come back. We came back, we went back into our home. My father later on remarried. 1949, I was involved with the Zionist movement. Escaped Hungary again because there was we had to go through the borders because during the communist era there was no passport either, and we escaped Hungary again and through Bratislava, Vienna, down to Italy, part of southern Italy. Finally, on May 1949, May 16, I arrived into Israel. When we arrived to Israel, there was a section, we had to go into the camp over there where they selected who is going to where. My brother and myself were sent into a kibbutz, where I stayed for about 2 years. And the kibbutz, finally, half a day we had to work, half a day we are studying. After that, when on my 18th birthday, I had to go into the army. I was in the army for nearly 2.5, nearly 3 years. I finished as an officer in the Israeli army. In 1956, I left Israel to England. I stayed 2 years in England. From there, I went to Canada for 12 years. That's when I met my wife. We are married for the last 59 years. I had 2 kids, 4 grandkids, and in I think 1970, I moved into the United States. This is my new family. My brother and myself on the center. My brother has 3 kids, 5 grandkids, and his spouses. I had 2 kids, 4 grandkids, and spouses. And this is my new family. This is basically my story in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please ask.
Okay, thank you guys so much for joining us. We hope that you learned a little bit or a lot about Peter's story. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Peter. The way that the Q&A portion is going to work, first of all, my name is Tatiana. I work for Cornell Hillel as the IACT coordinator, basically doing all things birthright. But today I'm going to be moderating the Q&A with Peter over here. So the first question I'm going to ask is going to be a question that someone submitted to the registration form. And that question is going to be, how did you stay determined and mentally strong during your experience?
I was always an optimist, and I said, I'm going to survive. The drive to make sure that I will survive. And that was driving me during I think it was 7 months from July 9th till January 27. I think it was about 7 months. During the 7 months, I always said, I'm going to survive. There's nothing that's gonna stop me from that one. And that was I was always, all my life, I was an optimist. And this is how I felt about it. And this is what drove me to survive and make sure that I stay alive.
Amazing. Does anyone that's currently in the Zoom room with us have any questions that they want to ask Peter? If you do, go ahead, and if you want to unmute yourself, that's fine. If not, then you can definitely chat into the box. So someone just chatted in, what was your first impression of Israel? Did you know about it as a small child?
I was 16-year-old when I arrived in Israel, 16-year-old. And believe me.
Israel was just 1 year old.
What?
Israel was just 1 year old.
It was just 1 year old. Israel became a nation 1948, May 15. I got there in 1949, May 16. So I was only 1 year old. Life was difficult, I tell you quite frankly. There was hardly anything around. When my parents joined us 2.5 years later, we didn't even have a fridge. Every morning I had to go to Mechano Yehuda and pick up a big block of ice and bring it home to the ice box. There was hardly anything at that time. It's very early. It was 1 year old by the time I got there. But kibbutz life for 2 years and then 3 years in the nearly 3 years in the army. It was a good time already. Believe me, after you can't envision the feeling the day I put on the Israeli army uniform. What kind of a feeling that was after I saw all these other German soldiers and the Hungarian soldiers killing all around. And then I had my own gun. I had all uniform soldier, and you have no idea what kind of feeling that was. And it was only 6 years or 7 years after Auschwitz itself. So it makes a big, big difference. Big good feeling.
Wow, I couldn't even imagine. This next question is one from our registration form, and that's, with the increased rate of young people not being aware of or not believing that the Holocaust occurred, do you have any suggestions as to how to educate people in a way that will make them truly understand? How do you feel about these statistics?
Well, the most important thing is that we survivors who in about 10, 15 years from now, there will be no survivors, life survivors who experimented life, who survived the Holocaust itself. So we ourselves really have to talk about it and have to educate all of you young persons about what it takes to survive, to be a Jewish person who can survive and stay alive after all this Holocaust and all these murders and killings that went through during this era.
I'm going to put my 2 cents worth in it. As much as it's difficult for a survivor to talk about it, and there is a whole group that goes to schools and universities and churches and synagogues to talk about it. And in other words, it's like the passing the baton to you, the next generation, that anyone who would say denies the Holocaust happened, you can always say you saw or you heard an actual survivor, and it did. So it's your responsibility of the second and third generation to carry on and educate. That's my saying.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Anna.
Because my feeling is that within 10 to 15 years, or even less, there will be no eyewitnesses to the Holocaust. Because I'm 87 right now. How much time I have after that?
He is an optimist, 15 years.
Still, and then they can, the deniers, they can have a field day to say, hey, it never happened. And that's why I was not able to talk about it. Believe me, from the liberation to the maybe 4 or 5 years since then, no.
You feel responsible to be the voice to talk about it.
No, but I wasn't able to talk about it. And believe me, it's not easy. Not easy to hash it all every time. And as I belong to a group of people, a Holocaust group of people, speakers, it's not easy to talk about it every time. Every time I just work it outside and inside and remember everything. It's not easy, I'll tell you. Sometimes I'm sure I wasn't very good at this, what I've told you guys right now, but really,
It's okay. It's okay.
that's all that I can say. It wasn't easy to talk about.
More and more states are making it compulsory to teach it in schools. And New York State is among the ones who are teaching it.
Yes, and it's definitely taken a while.
I don't know how much time they're going to spend on it in social study class, but at least it's better than nothing.
So the next question I have is, do days ever go by that you don't think about your experiences?
No.
No?
Unfortunately, one way or the other, it always comes up.
And it's still nightmares and anything it is.
And I tell you something, when I started talking about it to schools, every night, the next morning I speak, the previous night I could not sleep. Rehash the whole thing and I try to remember what really, maybe I left something out in my story right now because I said it very fast, but maybe I left something out. The only thing I remember really is that every day I saw that dead bodies and I got so used to see death all around me. When I saw the dead men, it just didn't make any difference to me. Just the same as the dwarfs died next to me in the fridge over there and didn't even bother me, didn't even faze me. There was the dead body next to me.
Okay.
So the experiments, even I was only 7.5 months in that place, but I have it forever. I know it. It stays with me forever. Even if I didn't suffer like the earliest experiments done on the twins, I was very lucky that I came later and there was not those deadly experiments that was done by Dr. Mengele. And that's
yeah. So I know someone actually, one of my colleagues from Hillel International actually just messaged me a question earlier and I think she wants to ask it. Michelle, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah, I'm happy to ask it. So hi, Peter, and hi, everyone. It was wonderful to hear your testimony. I'm a little bit emotional, I'm sorry, because you were in, my cousins were also twins of Dr. Mengele. Zvi and Ladislav Klein, they were my cousins.
yes, I remember.
The one from
Texas.
Texas, fine.
Yeah, he was in Miami. He passed away a few years ago.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, unfortunately, yes, I heard.
And I loved him very much. And what you said really touched my heart because his story and bringing it to the next generation is the inspiration for the work that I do. So I want you to know that we will continue to tell your story. We will make sure
I'm sure his story was very similar to mine.
Yeah, it was when you were speaking, everything was similar. Like I remember once he said to me, it's not funny, but he was a jokester. So he used to say to me, a little more experiment, a little less
All I
experiment.
remember with him, I all remember with him all the time that he said, when I'm survived, I will go home and I have a barrel of
Noodles with poppy seed.
Yeah, he was very silly. So
Yeah.
I just want you to know that as difficult as it is for you to give these testimonies, we're so grateful for them. And just so you know, we feel the responsibility as the next generation to continue to tell your story and all of the stories, and to not allow the topic of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, to become politicized.
He was also the Children of the Flames.
He was in the Children of the Flames. Yes, he was in the book, The Children
In the
of
book,
the
so
Flames.
Peter is in the book.
Yeah, yeah, you're in the book as well. So it was
Only
really
thing I
a pleasure to hear from you, and you brought me more memories of him. So thank you for sharing your testimony.
The
This
only
evening.
reason I'm talking about it, the only reason I decided, because for many, many years I didn't talk about it. I never discussed it with my brother. We never talked about it. I never talked about it to my father. How can I explain to my father how my mother passed away in the gas chamber? How can I explain it to him? Probably he knew it. Yeah. But still, we never talked about it until I came to a realization that as a survivor, my duty is to talk about it, to make sure that people don't forget it, because there are in about 10, 15 years, there will be no eyewitness survivors. And that's why we have to talk about it.
Thank you. Wow, that was very emotional. Then I guess this is probably going to be, I have 2 more questions I'm going to ask on the live stream, and then I invite other people, if it's fine with you, Peter, to stick around and be able to chat with you, obviously, if you guys feel comfortable. One of the questions that I've been getting a lot in the chat is, how did the Holocaust, I guess, change your views on religion, if it changed your views at all?
Okay, I brought up a very religious, not Orthodox, but very religious Shomrei Shabbat. People went to the shul, the synagogue, every Friday night and Saturday morning. We kept all the holidays. And then one day, when I saw and I realized that my mother, my sister went into the gas chamber, and questioned myself, where was God when my mother went into the gas chamber? Where was God? And that's when I somehow turned around and I said, there must be no God, because if God hadn't been there, my mother would be still alive and wouldn't have gone into the gas chamber. And that's changed my outlook on the religion. I keep my Jewish faith. I keep a couple of 2 holidays, Pesach and New Year's, because that's when the whole family gets together. My kids, my grandkids, all the friends. Sometimes at one time we used to have 22 people around this Seder table. But that's the only reason that's how I keep the holiday.
Thank you.
He believes in the tradition, but he doesn't
practice. I don't practice.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your candidness with that. This is the last question I'm going to ask, and the last question I'm going to ask on live stream. After that, after Peter's answer, I'm probably just going to take a little bit of time just to close it out on the live stream, and then anyone who wants is more than welcome to stick around and talk to Peter and his wife Anna if they would like to. This last question is, someone would like to know if you still have hate in your heart for the doctor or other Nazis in general. And I guess, how do you come to terms with the reality of how they've treated Jews?
Oof, hate,
good question.
Yeah,
it's a loaded question.
It's a good question.
Yes, I tell you something. When I went about I don't remember the date. We went back to Auschwitz, where my wife and my two kids, because at one time there was a mock trial of Mengele in Jerusalem. I don't remember the year anymore, but there was a German ambassador in attendance at that time, and he promised some restitution to the survivors. We got something. I used that money to take my wife and my two kids back to Auschwitz to show them how it looked like. Otherwise, when we're on the way to Auschwitz, we had to stop in Germany, Frankfurt, and we got out of the plane and went to the airport itself, and was hearing only German sound. Shook me. I couldn't stand it for long. Just the German sound, the German sound.
The question is, do you have any hatred?
I can't hate forever. Sometimes, yes, sometimes it comes to me that how come that they could do so much murder, so much bad things to do, and so killed most of my family. Yes, there is a hatred for them, but I can't hate forever. And
But he also has a hatred that all the genocide that's going around the whole world.
And then there is the second and third generation Germans. They are not responsible for the father's thing. So how
Definitely. And I remember a few years ago, I was actually able to meet a descendant of a Nazi camp, or a Nazi guard, who actually was in the town that my grandmother used to live in. So it was very, very interesting to say. So just to round out the live stream, we are going to be ending the live stream here. This is, I guess, the quote unquote end of the formal aspect of this event, but Peter will definitely be sticking around to answer any questions and to talk to as many people as you guys would want. He's a super interesting guy, so I definitely push you guys to definitely do that. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We hope that you learned something, and we hope that there's some lessons that you guys can take away from this. Thank you once again, Peter and Anna, for talking to us. I know that this was very impactful and very important and timely. So thank you.
I hope you guys carry it on.
Yes, thank you.